After Ruby Stein was sent to jail in the mid-1960s, his loansharking partner Jiggs Forlano was supposed to oversee their operation and bankroll. But by this time, Ruby and Jiggs' relationship had taken a turn for the worse. Who was Ruby Stein? Who was Jiggs Forlano? And what happened? Let's find out. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Mob Fireside Chat. At Mob Fireside Chat, we bring to life select stories from the pages of our Button Guys of the New York Mafia website, a virtual library of organized crime stories with a focus on hundreds of Cosa Nostra soldiers and associate members you never heard of, who kept the wheels of the Mafia machine turning for all the brigadas. So check us out today at www.thenewyorkmafia.com to get a real look behind the curtain of organized crime. And if you haven't already, subscribe to our channel, hit the like button, and leave us a comment with your thoughts about today's episode. Today, we're going to share a story about Ruby Stein, who partnered with a Colombo family hood named Jiggs Forlano in the Loanshark racket. This dynamic duo became New York City's reigning Shylocks until, as often happens in the underworld, things turned sour. And it wasn't a happy ending either, at least for Ruby Stein. Enjoy. Charles Ruby Stein was born in 1915 in New York City. He was arguably the single biggest Shylock in New York City during the 1950s to 1970s era. At one point, he was reputed to have over $5 million on the street on any given day. Stein started out as an independent until the early 1950s, when he was approached by Nicholas Jiggs Forlano, a soldier and later a capo in what was then the Profaci family of Brooklyn. They became partners as no independent could operate at such a high level without mob connections. Ruby and Jiggs, as they became known, handled mob funds generated not only by the Profaci family, but also several other families who contributed to their bankroll. Stein also utilized money invested by otherwise legitimate business people as a source of funds. Ruby Stein lived for many years in the Jackson Heights, Queens area. Forlano lived in neighboring Astoria, Queens. The dynamic duo was also heavily engaged in gambling operations, controlling several large-scale bookmaking combines with horses and sports. Stein was said to have a near-mathematical memory, able to retain all numbers, figures, and related interests and outstanding balances in his head. This eliminated the need for usury and gambling records, which helped him avoid prosecution. During the 1960s, the dynamic duo also operated a race wire service through several Jewish associates charging area bookmakers a weekly fee for the service. With the advent of tensions and the ensuing violence during the Gallo-Profaci War of 1961 to 1963, Forlano became a central figure and interim leader of the breakaway Gallo faction. Several attempts were made by the Profacis to win Forlano and ultimately Stein back into the family fold and the millions they controlled. Eventually, Forlano was persuaded to return to the Profaci side of the family. When this happened, he and Stein became major murder targets by the Gallos. Several murder attempts were made against Forlano, including shooting at him near his Astoria home. The Gallo gang also attempted to kidnap Stein off a Manhattan street corner, and only Stein's screaming, punching, and kicking at his assailants prevented his kidnapping and/or murder. In 1953, Stein served a prison term on an income tax conviction related to his gambling profits. In 1961, Ruby, Jiggs, and 14 others were arrested at the White Turkey restaurant on 57th Street and 2nd Avenue on consorting with known criminals charges. Authorities said they broke up what they referred to as a mob powwow of top gamblers across the city. In 1964, Ruby and Jiggs were charged with felonious assault and attempted extortion of an actor who couldn't pay back a $6,800 loan. Actually, authorities charged him with auditioning the actor as he was trying to explain why he couldn't pay back said loan. After Stein punched the actor in the face, Jiggs told him he'd break his arm if he didn't come up with the cash ASAP. "I won't do it now," Jiggs told him, "but I'll break it in a few days if you don't get the money." Instead of paying them back, the actor instead went to the cops. At that same time, Ruby and Jiggs were pulled into a state investigation hearing about the Loanshark racket in New York City. Ruby and Jiggs pled the fifth 22 times between them when investigators asked them about loansharking. As an interesting side note, The Gambino family's Carmine Lombardozzi was also called into this hearing. He took the fifth 18 times, all by himself. By all accounts, Ruby and Jiggs were riding high during this period. Ruby was considered the brains, while Jiggs was the muscle in their partnership. But Jiggs was a bad, degenerate gambler who spent large sums of money at area racetracks and on betting himself with other bookmaking offices. Always in need of money, Forlano eventually turned on Ruby. In 1965, Stein was once again indicted for tax evasion, convicted, and sent to federal prison. While Stein served his prison term, Forlano was supposed to oversee their operation and bankroll, but by this time, Ruby's relationship with Jiggs had taken a turn for the worse. Ruby Stein no longer fully trusted his longtime partner, and for good reason. Jiggs had approached his boss, Joe Colombo, and together they schemed to burglarize and or otherwise set up Ruby to rob a suitcase said to house a huge cash reserve of money Ruby owned. Subsequently, Ruby got wind of this scheme, took proper precautions to safeguard his funds, and immediately broke up the partnership. In the following years, Ruby would affiliate himself with Fat Tony Salerno and the Genovese mob. He also allegedly partnered with Genovese power Carmine Little Eli ZECCARDI. Despite this transfer to the powerful Genovese mob, Stein also befriended an Irish mob figure by the name of Jimmy Coonan, a boss of the West Side gang known as the Westies. Stein utilized Coonan as a young protege, loaning him money to run his own Loanshark business and using him on collections. But Stein miscalculated this time, badly. Rather than pay the shy money due Stein, Coonan chose instead to shoot him in the head one afternoon, and thereafter behead him, severing Ruby's head from his torso. Several weeks later, Stein's remains washed up on Jamaica Bay in New York. This was in 1977. Ruby Stein was 62 years old. As an endnote, by the mid-1960s, Jiggs Forlano had relocated to South Florida. He had a massive heart attack and died one afternoon doing what he enjoyed doing best. He was felled at the local racetrack. He too was only 62 years old, and this also happened in 1977. And that's the end of the saga of Ruby and Jiggs, at least a short version of Ruby's side of the story. We hope you enjoyed it. If you want to find out more about Jiggs Forlano, head on over to the NewYorkMafia.com and read our extensive bio on Ruby Stein's former partner. You can also find many other stories about little-known mafiosi who kept their respective borgatas running. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next episode of Mob Fireside Chat. Thank you for watching. Until next time.